My life's work is about helping parents create close, connected families. And one of those pieces is parenting skills. There's parenting skills, self-awareness of the parent, and healthy relationships. I work with so many great parents who come into me for either therapy or parent coaching, and they're really struggling with how to help their kids turn out to be the great adults that they want them to be. They are good parents who are pouring love into their kids. They have resources, they're supportive, they're kind, they're attentive. Kids have education, they have sports, they have all that kind of stuff. And yet sometimes these parents worry that they're raising jerks. And they're seeing their kids who aren't motivated, they are maybe lazy, or the parents aren't happy with the work ethic, or they worry about them not having passion or drive, not being able or willing to do chores, or being addicted to screens. They just worry about all of that stuff. And so that's why I see them. I've been thinking about, how do these hardworking, motivated parents, high-achieving parents who have so much to give their kids, struggle to raise kids who end up being great adults? And I think I've come across what might help those sorts of parents create great adults. Because in the maelstrom of day-to-day parenting, it's easy to tend to the behaviors and the little things, how to get out the door in the morning, how to get the kids to bed, how to stop the bickering, all those things that are short term. But if we lose sight of the big term, or if we're not parenting with the end in mind, we may actually end up not raising kids to be quite the adults that we had hoped for. So just recently I was reading this wonderful book called The Power of Moments. It's by Chip Heath and Dan Heath, and it's about why certain experiences have extraordinary impact. And there's an exercise in there that really made me rethink so much about how we look at parenting. So I'm going to share that story. The authors told a story about this guy named Michael Palmer, who was like a chemistry professor at the University of Virginia. And every year he runs an annual training for other professors to look at how they're teaching their curriculum. So he gathers all these professors, and the first day he has them write down their curriculum. They bring in their syllabus for the class that they're going to teach. Then in the first day, he asks them, what do you, like in 3 to 5 years from now, what do you want your students to remember or to be able to do, or how they think? And the professors name things like, I want them, when they see a bridge, I want them to be thinking about what holds that bridge up, what keeps that bridge from falling down. Another one says, I want them to be confident in reading research, and I want them to be collaborating and coordinating with their colleagues. And someone else said, I want them to be curious about math, like to click on the button or to click to read the article to dive in about some math feature. So they're talking about collaboration, curiosity, love of learning. Those were their big objectives. Then Michael Palmer told them to look at their syllabus and point out where in the syllabus they are teaching those skills: curiosity, passion, collaboration, confidence, all that sort of thing. And the professors were like, 0. It's not here. Because what they were doing was just breaking down the content they were supposed to teach, dividing it into 12 weeks, and just spitting out data and content to them. So the professors went back and rewrote their curriculum. And when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, I think that's what we do with parenting. We're not starting with the end in mind about the traits and the characteristics that we want our kids to have. Or maybe we are, we're thinking about it, but in our day-to-day parenting, maybe we're not actually executing that in the way that we really want to. And so I love this exercise to think about this concept of, for us as parents, to pause and write down, what traits do we want our kids to exhibit as adults? What skills do we want them to have? Who do we want them to be as humans? And then to go back to how are we doing at teaching that on a day-to-day basis. One of the things that I see with so many of the clients that I work with is they have all sorts of aspirations for their kids to be like hardworking and have grit and resilience. But in the moment when the kid is frustrated or embarrassed or hasn't gotten something done, parents tend to opt for keeping the kids happy or comfortable instead of grinding through the struggle of completing the task, or of experiencing the discomfort of doing without, or making them save for something to earn it instead of just having it be given to them. Happiness often gets prioritized over big picture learning. One example that I remember really clearly was I had this couple come in and they had a teenage boy and they were really fed up with him because he wasn't helping with the chores. And when he did, he didn't do a very good job. He would just, like with dishes, he would leave he just didn't do a good job. He would fuss about it, protest, not get it done, and then he did a bad job at it. And so I asked them, have you taught him the skills for cleaning a kitchen? Like loading the dishwasher and then hand washing and then looking around and wiping the counters and rinsing out the sink and wiping the table and closing the cupboards, all that sort of thing. Have you taught him the skill? And they were like, oh, they haven't. And then I asked them, so what are some of the skills that you want him to have by the time he goes to college? And this kid was a sophomore, so they had about 2.5 years left before he was going to go off to college. And they listed they want him to be able to do his own laundry and clean his room, clean his apartment, and be able to cook and get groceries for himself and iron a shirt, sew on a button. I threw in, what about managing his money? And they're like, oh yeah, that too. And so then I went back to, so how many of those skills have you taught, like intentionally taught him to do so far? And they honestly were like, none. We pretty much do all that stuff for him. And so I was like, so then when do you plan to teach him these skills? If these are things you want him to be able to do in 2.5 years, you can't wait until his senior year, the second half of his senior year, to do all that, because that is not when kids are really looking at their parents for all kinds of influence and teaching. And so their homework was to go home and make out a list of those things that they want to teach their son before he leaves home, and then assign a timeline to it. And they did. They came back and they're like, okay, for the rest of his sophomore year, we really want him to get good at doing laundry. And that includes teaching him how to do it and also then enforcing it. What do you do when he just leaves a mountain in the laundry room? What about if he leaves him laying on the floor in his room? There's parenting skill and guidance that goes along with teaching a kid how to do laundry. And then junior year, I think they were going to focus on some basic cooking skills. And they broke out chunks of time when they were going to teach each of those life skills, like really important life skills for somebody to have, unless someone can send a staff with their kids to college or to their life from this point forward. Kids need to learn these skills. And so for them, they went to looking at starting with the end in mind for what skills they wanted their son to have before he went off to college. And so I think this story from this book really helps me reframe it and think we need to do that from the big picture of value. So if we want our kids to have grit and resilience and be able to trip and fall in life and get back up and keep going forward, we've got to give them chances to practice that thousands of times while they're in our home. So it might mean that if the toddler didn't pick up his toys, he endures the struggle of having his toys go into toy jail. It's a little tiny example of learning if you don't do what you need to do, there's discomfort that follows. And then that can continue to the 10-year-old who goes to lacrosse practice without taking his lacrosse stick and has to face the coach and say, I forgot to bring my stick. And in my son's case, he ended up having to play goalie, which was a whole new thing and sort of stressful and frightening for him, but he survived. It was a good experience. And so if we can go over and over and over with giving our kids little chances to be uncomfortable, to develop grit, then they are more likely to come out with those skills when they're adults. Same with values like giving of our time, being compassionate, speaking our truth, just all those values. I think, so I'm not done with this subject. I think there's so much to be said about reverse engineering how we parent by really starting with what do we want to foster and bring to life in our kid. That's the easy part. And then how do we look at our day-to-day parenting and incorporate more opportunities to develop those skills while we have them at home, and not wait until their teenage years when we're starting to go, oh dear, what's happened here? Now we've got to correct course. It's not too late when they're teens, but the earlier we can start, the better. I've got more coming on this. Stay tuned about reverse engineering the skills we want our kids to have and starting with the end in mind.